Impressionism emerged in the late 19th century in France with artists such as Claude Monet and Edouard Degas. It was one of the first distinctly modern art movements and focused primarily on bright and intense colors, short strokes, and plein air techniques. Impressionists did not rely on realistic depictions of a scene. They sought to portray changes in the weather, movement, and atmosphere. Most paintings focused on people just having a good time in public places. No one really liked Impressionists because they did the art they actually wanted to do, and people back then hated fun.
Abstract is more focused on subject rather than detailed or accurate drawings. It is mostly broken down into basic components such as lines and simple forms rather than an accurate depiction of reality. It is a movement that was created in the 20th century and is a very loose sort of style. It was a fun experiment created by American artists, but it eventually spread throughout the world. This new form of art was received quite well, especially through Europe. It was also the start of several other similar movements.
The Art Nouveau movement emphasized in handcrafting with textures of organic and Asian forms. The main value of this movement focused on artists escaping from past art styles. Flat shapes are strong characteristics of this movement, while the artists took elements from organic and elegant designs to produce these flowing lines. This was to represent the freedom that came from the opposition of social expectations. Nature was also a large inspiration for these artists when producing these paintings.
Medieval art spanned from the fall of the Roman Empire to the beginning of the Renaissance. It's largely influenced by the basis of Christianity and the art styles of the Byzantine and Romanesque styles, which later broke off into the Gothic art style. The mediums varied significantly, including paintings, sculptures, metalworking, mosaics, and stained glass. These artists valued Christianity in their artwork and wanted the public to appreciate their classical themes.
Baroque was developed in the 16th and 17th century. Baroque was most commonly performed by a combination of architects, artists, and sculptors. Baroque is most often thought of as a style that amplified motion and ornate detail that leads to drama and tension. Baroque is used in columns, round arches, and domes. These are mainly found in old cathedrals and palaces. The intricate details used commonly tell a story regarding royalty, religion, or other particular belief system.
Pop art. Art based on modern popular culture and the mass media, especially as a critical or ironic comment on traditional fine art values, developed in the 1950s, took inspiration from comic strips, fast food, billboards, and brand name products. Some artists include Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, and James Rosenquist. Fauvism, an early 20th century style and movement in art, especially painting, in which perspective with a single viewpoint was abandoned and use was made of simple geometric shapes. The subject matter is broken up, analyzed, and reassembled. Rococo is an early late to French 18th century style of art, the interior decoration that emphasized portrayal of the carefree life of the aristocracy rather than historical or religious subjects. Gothic, a style in European art that prevailed from the 20th through the 15th century. It was characterized by pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and flying buttresses. Artists include Maestro Guillermo and Benito Antalami. Ancient Egypt. In their written language, they form symbolic picture writing called hieroglyphics. Ancient Egyptian art is the painting, sculpture, and architecture, and other arts produced by the civilization of ancient Egypt in the Lower Nile Valley from about 3000 BC to 30 AD.
Classical Greek art stands out among that of older ancient cultures for its development and idealized depictions of the human body. The rate of how detailed they were from 750 and 300 BC was remarkable by ancient standards, for their work was best seen in their sculptures.
The Roman art movement was based off some ancient Greek artworks. Roman artworks would include paintings, sculptures, architectures, and mosaics artworks, some luxury artworks in metalwork, gem carvings, iron carvings, along with some glass works. These were called a smaller form of Roman art, but most of the Roman artists came from Greek colonies. One famous Roman artwork is fresco wall from House of Livia. It is also 2,000 years old. Early 20th centuries, they were a modern artist group. They used strong colors instead of using representational or realistic color. Values that used by Impressionism. Some of the main artists were Romanticism and Adrian Darren. Fauvism paintings were characterized by what type of brushwork and the stride colors, while the paintings had a high degree of simplification and a
Surrealism is a movement that began in the early 1920s. The idea for Surrealism was to change the way people viewed the world. Many people were skeptical because they didn't feel like they understood what was happening in the paintings. They were used to pretty realistic paintings of things often found in the real world. Surrealism opened up their minds and taught them that not everything is what it seems. Some major surrealist artists are Salvador Dali and Max Ernst. Renaissance art movement focused more on people and earthly life than anything else. Their investigations into this art led to major advances in science, including explorers from Spain, Italy, England, and Portugal began exploring the world. Leonardo da Vinci began to study the field of optics, mechanics, and human anatomy. Renaissance scholars revived interest in classical art and literature. They studied ancient writings from philosophers like Plato. The art and architecture of ancient Greece and Rome, which was neglected during the Middle Ages, became admired, emulated by architects and artists. The explosion of artistic output was especially evident in Florence. First discovered in 1897 in northern Spain by an amateur archaeologist, Marcelino de Salutola. But more paintings were discovered in northern Spain and southern France, some of them partially concealed in calcium deposits. During the Ice Age, people used clay, wood, bone, and stone to carve and create sculptures, but they were best known for their cave paintings. Ice Age artists made pigments from natural materials such as iron oxide for red and yellow and charcoal for black. Post-Impressionism is a combination of Impressionism and Realism art. This movement began around 1910 after Impressionism was over its peak and more art movements began to take the public's focus. Most Impressionism focused less on the chunky brush strokes that Impressionism forged and more on realistic scenes and aspects, but applying the Impressionism look, just toned down a bit. Artists wanted to create paintings that showed a picture and focused more on the picture than the painting style. Post-Impressionism still appears today in art and has influenced many art movements. Romanticism art was art that was created in Rome. This art movement focused on religion, outdoor scenes, and rarely people weren't involved in the paintings. The paintings focused on realistic, and realistic. People and scenery in the paintings rarely looked anything less than a photograph. Although gods, goddesses, angels, and Jesus were in these paintings, they were still made to look as if they were photographed.